All right, good morning, everybody. Today is September 26th. It's a little past 1 o'clock. Council members Moreno, and I are here. So that completes roll call. The meeting is called to order. Council member Moreno moves for approval of the Budget Committee meeting minutes of August 17th, seconded by Council member Morel. Seeing no opposition, that item carries unanimously. While we try to wait for some more committee members to filter in, can we skip item 3 very quickly and start with item 4? I don't want to hold the administration here unnecessarily, but I would like to try and give some other committee members a few more minutes, and we typically take this sort of at the top anyway. So for whoever is presenting on item 4, will you please come forward and we'll just start with that. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I'll just get rolling here. Matthew Cooper, Chief Economist. Just have really the revenue collection report to provide for you today. Again, most of the components in the general fund are going very much as we expected at the beginning of the year. There are a couple of, let's say, operational issues that have popped up. One related to licenses and permits, which I think we're all aware of. Also, there are, if we can go to miscellaneous, number 6 there at the bottom, there are several one-time payments that account has received that have put that particular component far over expectations.
I was wondering about that because it's significantly higher. What is the interest in the operating, the capital, and the contributions and the miscellaneous reimbursement? So I guess 6.1, 6.3, and 6.5.
Right. So interest operating capital is just savings interest on money we have in the bank.
Okay. So as a result, in other words, just as a result of having more money and the higher interest rates, that's increased.
Yes, that's a function of both of those things.
Okay. All right, and then 6.3.
Contributions and other, the issue there have been a couple of insurance settlements and a legal settlement, I believe, related to opioids that have come into the tune of about $9 million there.
Okay.
And then miscellaneous reimbursement. I think that's something that I brought up a couple of months ago, but there's $10 million check we received from New Orleans Building Corporation there. That's in there that we did not anticipate.
Okay.
That happens like once every 10 years. So.
All right, that's good. And it looks like also property tax is higher than it was last year too.
Yes, that's the result of master processing and better systems that we've had in place in the Treasury Bureau.
Okay. Colleagues, any questions? Nope. All right. Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Sure.
See you tomorrow at REC.
Yes, you will.
Right.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So we're moving to the personnel projection for the month ending August 31st, 2023. And we see a few different changes that we hadn't seen before here. Some of the same that we had seen. One of the changes we do here see was something with NORD. When we had our summer lifeguards who came in, we had some increases there, which is a good reflection that we had here for this summer. There were the summer lifeguards, some of the same we've seen here with NOPD, even with sanitation, and some of the same surpluses that we've had. Any questions with this report?
I still am wondering about NOPD. I feel like I ask you every month.
Mhm.
So I guess what I'm confused by is I thought we built the budget for 1,150 NOPD officers. We're below 900. I know we've hired some more civilians, but I don't think enough to get the delta of 8 million. So I'm just trying to figure out why there's discrepancy.
Okay, so we built the budget for 1,199 total positions for NOPD, not just for officers, but for all personnel.
Right.
Okay, and for every month, minus the month of January, we have been over those number of positions. This month we have, on this report, it's over 47. In July, we were over by 56, June over by 20, May over by 35, April over by 31, March over by 34, February over by 8. January was the only month we were not over that number. So before we even talk about the number that we're over, we're gonna have a deficit based upon just those numbers. So now, outside of that, we have additional factors that would give us the difference as well. So the MEPRS payments, and then additional overtime for the NOPD payments for NOPD officers would get us to that number.
How much of this is the MPERS payment that's been made?
Okay, so I don't have that number in front of me,
Okay.
but yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd like to know that.
Mhm.
And I know this isn't you, but just going forward, that there needs to be an ordinance for allocating that money.
There needs to be what?
An ordinance for allocating that money?
Oh, so the Empress payment, to my understanding, is part of personnel. Is it
Really?
not? It's part of, is it a pension payment?
I mean, I struggle to say that it is because it seems like we're dealing with an increased payment that was, for the council at least, unforeseen. And so I understand the rationale of drawing it out of personnel, but at the same time, I don't think it was reasonably foreseeable to be.
And I
I see
think it
Mr.
was- yeah,
Mr. Montano right
okay,
now.
yeah.
Thank you.
Chairman Jeruso, members of the council, I know Brandy's reflecting what is on paper right now relative to a projected deficit. I think there's about 6 different conversations as we enter the budget process that we're going to have with the council, specifically budget chair, on how to manage through various different pieces of this. The numbers, at least from my perspective, are not the purest they should be in the sense of the projected deficit. There's some different pieces. You know, NOPD has a $1.9 million deficit projected. We have a different deficit projected. So I guess right now at this stage is when really everything is flowing into the decision-making process where we get a real true up of exactly where we're going to have to stand as we submit the 2024 budget. So I guess if we could just not analyze exactly what is being presented today, because I think there's decision points specifically for that Empress payment. And absolutely where that money comes from has to be discussed between the council, the administration. I don't foresee it being built into the personnel budget as it's currently is, because it's probably a long-term issue we need to be thinking more aggressively at. But at the same point, I think what Brandy is presenting is just the data she has based on the numbers as of today projected to year out. So I only just say that to some. There are about probably 4 major things as we get into the budget conversations specifically to NOPD that we'll have to factor in.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Large, anything else on personnel? All right, operating expenses.
The operating is trending, as we expected. Our office, the budget office, continues to work with the departments just to ensure that they are reaching out and working with purchasing as well to ensure that items for the year are encumbered, to make sure we have a true accurate picture of the items that should be obligated for the rest of the year.
Okay.
Any specific questions?
Not on this. Thank you. I don't think. I guess, and this may be more for Gilbert later on, but as we're preparing for saltwater issues, think everybody needs to start thinking about their personnel and their operating budget. I mean, Gilbert, I don't want to complete, and yeah, you're more than welcome to, obviously. But I'm just saying, I think everybody needs to start with eyes wide open about what could happen.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I think unequivocally that we all have to be all hands on deck as if it was a storm readiness project where we have a declaration of emergency settled. I think over the next coming weeks and in some cases months, we'll have to determine exactly what we'll have to front potentially. I know the Army Corps, we had our briefing earlier this week. They're spending upwards of $100 million for various projects to be able to sustain things should it get worse. But the anticipation and the objective of both the fund balance report that we'll discuss later, as well as the potential emergency declaration consequences relative to pay, are going to be extremely concerning as we enter this last budget cycle. I think that depending on where we end up as it relates to the rain, whether we get it or if the sill gets raised long enough, it's so many unknowns. What I can say is that we are prepared financially should it become a major issue. I think that was all part of the goals and objectives of making sure we had such a large reserve to ensure the practical nature of what we have to deal with, depending even on a reimbursement process. So that is a huge, thank you for addressing it, issue that we all contemplate unforeseen, but we do feel as though we are prepared should we have to financially sustain some portion of this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess I know that you are preparing, but I just want to make sure that other agencies that rely on city money are preparing similarly. I guess that's really my worry, is that the city has the potential to have to front a lot of money for necessary city operations. And so ancillary, unneeded luxury items should be avoided at this time unless the administration disagrees.
No, don't disagree at all.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lodge.
Thank
All right. I don't see Councilmember Green. I know he always gets excited about your FTE report.
We look for him to help us out with a commercial at this time. Because we, even though we're here, we still have a few vacancies that show up across here, and knowing the way we did the budgeting for this year was based upon actual positions. So the departments are still passing, and I saw Christina Hamilton on the way down, our assistant CAO of HR. And she wanted to make sure that you all know that the recruiting supervisor is now hired. So there's going to be some movement there helping to get some of the positions and some more word on the street and some more streamlining for vacancies and keeping positions afloat. So that's our word there for the staffing on that piece.
Good. Thank you. I think we can skip over the larger, more detailed FTE report, unless there's anything you're dying to go into. Got it. All right. And then anything necessary to report on fund balances and any of the revenue and funds?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Questions?
No, I don't have any from the council. Nope. Thank you all very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Good seeing y'all. See you again tomorrow. All right. That concludes item number 4. We'll go back now to item number 3, which is the administration's report about ARPA and fund balance. And the floor will be yours.
Chairman Jeruso, would you like us to begin?
Yes, please.
I think you know everyone at the table, presumably.
Yeah.
Oh, Norman's struggling. All right. Good afternoon, members of the committee, Chairman Jeruso. The slide deck is 91 slides. I have no intention of going through 91 slides, I assure you, but wanted to err on the side of information should you have anything you'd like to be more myopic to address or get into more granular details. So my presumption is that I will prepare an introduction, go through some of the high level comparison charts from the spend down rate, introduce a little bit more of our new project management team, and then dive a little bit later into the fund balance report now that we've had the finalized audit, and then address any questions in between. Having said that, I will dive right into the presentation. I always want to plug the ARPA dashboard. We have a lot of team members working on this all the time in real time. And frankly, I think everyone's so far has been very proud of the work that's gone into it. I think that this gives real time updated information for all the projects that you'll see currently listed. I think the website was an important factor where at any time, at any moment, employees, residents, any electeds can go and visit and see kind of where we are at relative to project specific guidelines. So I put and plug the website up there as I try to do during these presentations, so that on your spare time, you're able to go and track whatever you'd like. The next piece I wanted to highlight is when you're dealing with this amount of money, part of the challenges in city government is someone always takes on additional roles and duties. It's important and imperative that we created a project management team to ensure that these projects hit the ground running. We know that we are working on a time clock, and we know that the needs are great, and we want to ensure that there is both the necessary reporting requirements, the necessary monitoring, most importantly, the necessary project management to ensure and support the departments assigned by these various details. So relative to that, I asked the team to attend. They're behind me in the audience. And I've put a little bit of their information in their bios for your edification as well. But moving forward, this will be the main point of contact, obviously, for me to the ARPA project management team, and responsibility solely vested in this project design and management process, similar to a PMO. As you know, you appropriated an administrative fee for the ARPA projects, which is where this is coming up from, and it won't hit the general fund in any sort of way. So I wanted to highlight that. One of their goals and assignments you'll see, and I have highlighted, is to what I just similarly addressed, develop and spending project timelines, public reporting, awards, supporting departments. I know that there is recently or in the process of a ARPA Implementation Advisory Committee. Certainly these will be the point of contacts for all those major pieces, and anything else as assigned according to where we have to go in the delivery of these important and vital projects for the city. Then I'll just go briefly into the spend down. I won't belabor these points, and in fact, I will dive into kind of the meat of the conversation if it's the will, and then I can certainly go through any of the 91 slides that you all would like in more detail. But I think the most important part is kind of where we are now, and I really wanted to put that up there. And if Courtney, is that the slide?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the 2A, tranche 2A, and then recently you all passed, or I shouldn't say recently, it's been some time, tranche 2B, and you'll see the progress in some of the cases and still the development in the other cases. Just so you know, each one of those cells on the Excel spreadsheet has a correlation within your presentation to kind of see where we are, what the projected timeline, the start date. As we've said, we always anticipated this first year in the development of CEAs, the development of RFPs, all the major components associated with spend down the money, but overall, we do feel we are on track. I think we've always said unequivocally that the projects initially proposed may have to have a reevaluation period if we do not think that they're spending down in a point necessary for completion by the end of the timeline. And that'll be a significant responsibility of the ARPA project management team to provide us that information on where we think we're going to have to adjust. I will say this as well, and I think it's germane to the prior conversation we had. Part of the expansion of the ARPA rules is that we can use them for emergencies. They do allow ARPA funds to be used for emergencies. So if push does come to shove on, belts and suspenders with that significant fund balance designed for emergencies, we also can as a body and entities reevaluate ARPA projects should we get into a tough scenario for emergencies now that DC has expanded those rules. We don't know or anticipate if there'll be other expansions of rules, but it's very clear that the progression could be more leniency on some of the ideas and plans that we can spend. I think we saw that in the previous COVID funding prior to this.
Yeah, Gilbert,
Sure.
I want to ask about that. I know Councilmember Morrell has a question too. Mine is, as soon as you hear about the saltwater intrusion, and you're right, none of us knows, will it be a minimal thing? Will it be a medium-sized thing? Will it be a large impact? I guess, having been scarred by COVID now and the impacts it did to the city, making sure that we have a plan. And I appreciate the fact that we have all the money sitting in both the rainy day fund and what I guess I characterize as the non-protected rainy day fund that's there. But if necessary, we can dip into these ARPA amounts that are unobligated and unspent if we get to that
Sure.
dire situation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I think that the most important thing is to prepare adequately, but this is certainly a federal issue. And the last thing I would want the city to do is raise their hand first to offer our funds.
Right.
I mean,
course.
that would be the way some of the numbers, $125 million just gone in water over the course of time. We have money, but not that kind of money. So our position essentially is we are the last resort for what our citizens may need immediately that cannot be either covered by the federal or the state government. But in no way are we volunteering any of this money, both ARPA or anywhere in the process, simply because we are the smallest bank account relative to this, state, essentially federal disaster issue forthcoming. So there is preparation, but we are leaning very heavily on the Army Corps. Obviously, that's where the significant funding has gone first. I know, and I believe that a emergency declaration request has been made into FEMA for X amount of dollars, and there is some significant strategies happening led by the Army Corps and the Sewage and Water Board. Those seem to be the closest partners in this particular relationship, but obviously our city is engaged, as will Jefferson Parish currently is, and all the other surrounding areas.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we all want to spend federal money before we spend our own, given what's happened. Councilmember Morrell. Oh, good. I'm gonna come in first.
Well, just a couple of quick points. First, obviously, before piggybacking off the ARPA discussion, is there a concern if the city has to spend money to make sure that we're identifying non-ARPA money to spend first? Only because in my experience in the legislature, there is the double dipping issue with the feds, where if we were to spend ARPA money on disaster recovery, there's always a chance they could say, well, you spent federal money on this, so you're not eligible for more federal money. So I just want to make sure we're identifying the pots, because I would hate for us to use ARPA money that we need for ARPA issues, use it for disaster response, and the feds ding us because we use the federal dollars.
Unequivocally, I think that is, like I said, a singular last resort. So if there's item 1, 2, 3, this is like item 36
Okay.
on the list. I just don't want to anticipate reallocating. I mean, these are important initiatives collectively we think the city of New Orleans needs. So we certainly don't want to, defund them, put them toward this project. So yeah, I say that only for edification, not for priority at all.
Well, but do we have non-ARPA funds available if the city does have to spend money is my question.
The short answer for emergency, yes.
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think that you'll see that in the fund balance report.
My second question, in regards to the criminal justice IT overhaul, it seems that we've spent an obligated a very small sum as far as the overall cost. Can you give us a more detailed idea of what's left to be spent on the IT overhaul?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Council President Morrell, and I would even take it a step further and ask that maybe at one of the next committee meetings, we could have a more elaborate conversation to present some of the ideas. She's fast forwarding to that particular slideshow, but really the major pieces that not spent are the external agencies updates. So the GMS system at the sheriff's office, that's somewhere in the $7 to $8 million range, and all the different pieces associated with potential upgrades to the DA software and other external entities that are currently need updated technological equipment, software, hardware, not to get into the minutia of it, to be able to speak the same language in this data lake that we're creating within the city. So right now, what has been spent is the foundational organizational structure of our PMO, specifically the project team that is now deployed to all these external agencies to develop the comprehensive plan. So there's no diversion from the roadmap that was originally provided to you all and established. We're just, and if you look at the timeline, we still are on time and on schedule and on budget for where we project the outcome to finally be.
Okay,
So there's been no deviation of that project plan. In fact, if I was to be most proud of the way a current initiative is going, this is probably the one that I would shine up as an example.
so in that 30 million appropriate, it did not contemplate any additional money going towards Hexagon. These are separate.
I'm only pausing because I want to think about,
Only because since that contract's been canceled,
Yeah.
there might be a savings in there, because obviously when the city and OPCD had the original deal with Hexagon, there was a cost allocated to it. The contract's been canceled. I just want to make sure that if since Hexagon has been canceled, if there was a portion of this money that was allocated for that purpose, that we identify and say this is money that will not be spent and can be repurposed. That's all.
sure. So I'll take you a little bit even deeper. Now, Hexagon is canceled and we had
Okay.
to,
Right,
there has to be something to replace it.
correct.
And I think that what we're looking to do in all transparency is what all the other entities have utilized. I think it's Mark 43. Before we invest and make that complete transition through a piggyback contract through the state, we want to evaluate it extremely well. And that's one of the project scopes for our PMO to ensure that that is the right product for us and that there should be no challenges or questions, even though we anticipate it based on the user feedback and whatnot. So that won't delay the implementation, but it gives us, once again, that cover to ensure that this is the right product for things that our internal staff may not be able to highlight or articulate as a challenge. So we are switching to a new system, potentially and hopefully Mark 43. But we just want to have that second layer of external validation that that is the right system, because I think that was the challenge with Hexagon. It just got thrown on versus really evaluating.
Well, and to your point, and I appreciate that, because I think that there was very little input given by the users as to whether or not Hexagon was viable to begin with. When you talk to anybody in law enforcement, fire, the like, they all hated Hexagon. And I think that if we're going to go back down this road of trying to integrate systems, that we make sure the people who actually have to use it, like I'm talking about firemen in the truck, police officers in the car. If this is not user friendly for them, it doesn't matter if it's a cost savings, if it's unworkable. So I appreciate y'all taking a step back to make sure the actual users of the program in software will actually be able to completely understand and utilize it, because if we don't do that, that'll be problematic. One more quick follow-up. In regards, I know that there was a moment, and I don't know if this was resolved, where the sheriff's office wanted to go in a different direction when it came to IT performance and IT products. Are they back in house with everyone else, or are they still trying to do their own thing?
And Mr. Montani, before you answer, also, to that, where are they on integrating into brass too? So we can see the operating
Right.
expenses as well.
Sure. Two very different answers.
Yeah.
The first answer is I really in good faith, and I think in the example, they are working very well with us to integrate their future JMS product, their future criminal justice ecosystem, software, hardware. They've allowed one of my staff members to be on their selection committee. They're taking heated advice. So I feel confident that they're on the same, timetable, same goals and anticipation for the criminal justice system. On the brass system, I don't feel it's the same path forward. I think that there is some more challenges related to that peer integration and that visualization that we can discuss further at some different point. But on the one side, I think that there is really good cooperation. On the other side, there still may be a little confusion about what system best fits for us to be able to see what their spend downs, or whether or not I think they overtly said they don't want to get on brass is the short story, or within our financial system. But even if that's not the case, there are other measures for us to be able to have better insight. And ultimately that fund balance is, how are they spending? How are they trending? What is their burn rate? All of that information we're getting very delayed and often piecemeal through a spreadsheet of some sort. So it is not the most sophisticated process that we can try to help support, but all the same, I won't say that it hasn't been impossible. I just think that there has to be a little bit more direction about what it is we will need from them to be able for them to provide it, and then an evaluation if they're even able to provide it. I'm not sure that they can at the current moment.
Well, and this relates to both issues, though I know the answer is very different. I guess my concern has always been, why is there so much self-determination in these conversations when the city of New Orleans ultimately has to pay the cost? Like, for example, I've never understood, I mean, Hexagon aside, because Hexagon's a train wreck, but I've never understood if we are gonna spend money and have an economy of savings and having a singular provider who then, I guess, creates bespoke systems that all integrate together, why would the city ever pay for the sheriff to pick a completely different system and then us try to figure out how we're going to integrate it into a system when every other agency is on the same system? And to that point, many people don't like brass. In fact, I can't think of anyone who has anything positive to say about brass, but brass is what we have. Why would the sheriff's office have the ability, if we are providing the funding for its contracts and services and the like, when it comes to their money they generate from their millage, that's their own thing. When it comes to our dollars and how they're spending it, how do they make the argument that they should be allowed to deviate from brass?
I don't think it's a question of logic, because the logic clearly defines that they should. I think it's a political question about their autonomy, and we are our own elected official and we decide and run our operation. I know that those two don't blend, but I think that's always been the response in many of the cases with all the external agencies, the autonomy to decide how, what, when, where, and why. You're required to fund us, you give us the money, and we, carry out the mission we were elected to do. So I think that is.
I mean, what prevents us from, and I hate to invoke the disaster, which was the ongoing standoff with criminal district court. But I mean, the way that was resolved is you get FTEs or you don't get anything else. I mean, the thing is that we are required to provide them funding. We're not required to buy them programs. We're not required to do a lot of things unless we get receipts. I mean, my understanding is that using some of our other independent elected offices, whether it be constables or the like, they buy their cars, but they buy them through us, right? I mean, that's the way it is. I don't understand why we have this very different relationship with the sheriff's office where there is an expectation that they're required to get funding with no oversight. Now, if there was a law on the books at the legislature, similar to what happened with the clerk, where they get very specific delineated powers with how their spending goes, well, then we're stuck dealing with that. But in this instance, we're not. The only money, because of the weird hybrid nature of the way we interact with our sheriff, the only money that our sheriff is entitled to exercise absolute control over is their law enforcement district millage dollars. That is money that goes from, it's a pass through to us from them. But when it comes to our budget dollars, I think we're going to get to a point probably this year, if I had to guess with our current chairman, where we say, no, if you're not going to be on brass, then everything that you want to buy, you can go buy with millage dollars. And if you want to buy things like cars and the like that you expect the city to pay for, it has to be on brass. When it comes to technology, if you want to buy a program with your millage dollars, well, that is absolutely your right. But if you're going to obligate us to a multi-year contract with a computer company or software company for development software, it has to be through us because we're saddled with the cost. That's just the nature of how that relationship works. So I know it's frustrating for you, and I know you don't want to quite go as far as what I'm saying, but I think for the council, which is trying to budget for all departments and the city and best utilization of our budget dollars, it just doesn't make sense for them to continue to be an outlier just because. And it seems at this point, they're an outlier because they don't want to be inside dealing with everybody else.
And I can say that the administration supports that. We would love to have visualization to their funding and to their expenditures real time, and especially their spend rate, their burn rate, and their fund balance. So we are all on board. If we can visualize that and it can somehow be managed into the negotiation process, we would love that. That would make my office's life extremely easier and better, I assure you.
Well,
And more accountable.
And last comment, but going towards phase 3 and how much money we have to pay on that, it would give us a lot less heartburn if we knew exactly how much money the sheriff's office was spending in comparison to their millage dollars, because the expectation is the city is footing the bill for the new jail, and there is no requirement that the sheriff, there is nothing that prevents the sheriff from putting some money into if money's available. And if we don't know how much money the sheriff has and how much money they're spending, then it is quite likely that they could have extra dollars laying around to offset this tremendous capital cost, so that we all bear some of the burden, rather than they spend all their money. We don't know how they spend it. They spend our money. We don't know how they spend it, and they tell us they're broke. So we have to pay for the whole jail by ourselves. So that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council President. Madam Vice President.
Thank you. So just following up on that, I think it's really frustrating for us when we hear from the sheriff's office that they don't have any money. And then all of us here, you all included, find out after the fact that, you know, there's like this huge lease on new Tahoes for just the leadership team. And it's like, you know, a huge number of new Tahoes. And it's like, well, why did your entire leadership team need all new cars? You know, I mean, so it's just, that's, I think, where we get frustrated, and I think where the public gets frustrated as well. So just to kind of button up that point, like whatever we can do so that we can better understand their finances and what they really have or don't have, I think it's going to be a huge benefit to not only, of course, us within the city that have to make these particular payments, but also to the sheriff's office as well, so that they can have more trust from the public in being a more transparent type of organization. Just had to add that real quick on that. I didn't really have a lot of comments on the sheriff's office, just that, but I do have some questions on some other slides. And then I do want to come back around to the issue of the saltwater intrusion. So on page 74, Courtney, I'm just helping you out so you can get to that particular slide. Going to our particular fleet acquisitions where we appropriated $50 million. So far, we've spent 3.7, we've committed, it looks like 7.5, with the remaining of over $38 million. What's happening here? I mean, is it hard to acquire vehicles? What's going on with the spending of the rest of this money?
I will defer to our vehicle purchaser.
Part of it is they haven't been delivered yet, so we'll start to see that spend down once they come in. The big order of the Durangos, largely for NOPD, is coming in towards the end of this year. Because of the timing of the money, we issued purchase orders out of other pots. I think we talked to you all about that until this funding actually was appropriated, just so we wouldn't lose out on those vehicles, because we had to get them in to the order bank before it closed, which they couldn't do without a purchase order. So we worked with Norman Frieda and their team to find additional pots of money. We're just going back and reconciling that right now. So you'll start to see that committed number come up, and then that year-to-date spend come up as well.
Courtney, how does it work to acquire the vehicles? Is it, do you have to go specifically to, you know, through a state procurement type of process, or can you reach out to local dealerships? Like, explain to me and to the public how that works.
Yeah, so the most efficient way is to use a state contract, just because it's already in place. They already have relationships, and we can just order directly from the manufacturers, depending on the make and model. They have a dealership that they awarded the contract to. We work with that dealer, go in and say, we want 50 Ford Tahoes with these specifications. They put that in the order bank for us, and then it goes to Ford or Dodge or whoever the manufacturer is for production. Doing that does not guarantee that we're going to receive a vehicle. It's just us putting our order in and we have to hope that it gets fulfilled on the back end.
And we're in competition with everybody else in the state.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's one option. The other option is, or things that we have done is piggyback off of other parishes across the state. So Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office had placed an order. They didn't end up wanting all of the cars that they ordered. So the dealership reached out to us and we were able to piggyback on that to acquire those vehicles. I believe they were F-150s and F-250s that they did not order. The challenge with that is we're not nailing down the specifications. So we just kind of have to get what they chose, and it usually works out fine, but it might just have some additional upfitting costs on the back end, which is what we saw last year when we bought those 75 police vehicles from Baton Rouge. So we had to do more upfitting on those vehicles than we traditionally would have because they were configured for Baton Rouge, not New Orleans. So that's an option. The other option is we could go out and do an invitation to bid through our own procurement process and just say, hey, this is what we're looking for. These are the specifications you want. And folks can respond that way as well. We traditionally have not had very much luck doing that historically, just because dealerships already have contracts in place with the state, and that is a bigger contract value as opposed to just kind of buying cars off one and two. You know, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I know on the electric vehicle side, Julian and Greg Nichols are working to join the electric vehicle collaboration, which would allow us to have some additional access to vehicles. The other thing I will add is with the emergency deck that you all did, we were able to purchase some vehicles from out of state as well, but that was a similar situation where another municipality had ordered them and didn't want them, and we were able to scoop them up. That's how we got those 10 Chevy Bolts. Those came from Texas.
Oh, yeah. Got it. Got it. All right. Thank you.
So there's-
Appreciate that.
Yep, no problem.
And then on page 78, this is on the Right to Counsel program. This, we appropriated $2 million. This says that the city has been able to fully fund the needs of the Right to Counsel program using emergency rental assistance funds. So weren't the emergency rental assistance funds used to help people pay with their rents? And I thought there was going to be an additional $2 million that was going to go to the Right to Counsel program.
So I'll have to just reflect what was reported to me on this particular issue is that this particular $2 million mark said was covered by ERA funds. And so that this was a potential opportunity to reevaluate how we want to utilize or spend the money. I hear your question is, why didn't the money go to ERA and then this be used for the Right to Counsel as opposed to taking some of the ERA funds? And I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to talk to Tyra.
The only reason why I say that is because the ERA money was supposed to be so that people don't lose apartments
Right.
and get evicted, so that they would have to go use the Right to Counsel, obviously funding. So it's like by not providing enough rental assistance funds, we probably were putting more people toward Right to Counsel,
Right.
needing the Right to Counsel services.
I
So
don't want to speak unintelligently about this, but we never went to the housing department and said, hey, use your funds, don't use the 2 million. So I don't know if there was an additional funding for this. I don't know all the clarity or the information to be able to say what you just described is true or false.
yeah,
So I'll just have to get back with
I
you,
don't know. That's what I'm
Tyra.
asking. Yeah.
There was definitely no request, don't spend this money, use your own internal funds. So I don't know what translated from that to be able to now provide the additional 2 million. So we'll just have to owe you an answer on that.
Yeah, that would be great, because if for some reason we took money from rental assistance funds and moved it to the Right to Counsel program, then I think we need to put back the money into the rental assistance funds so that people who are facing evictions and things like that could have those services. Because I think the intent was always that the Right to Counsel program would be on top of also having rental assistance as well, not using the rental assistance funds. So if you could
I will.
bring me back more information on that,
Sure.
that would be great. Okay, so then back to saltwater intrusion. So we talked earlier that, should we need to put in any monies, that it would come from fund balance, and hopefully this would be money that we would put in that would later be reimbursable, of course, coming in either from the federal government or from the state. And obviously in part of the presentation here, although this is in the same vein but not ARPA money, we provide money for sewage and water board for the substation. Do we need to start working on any type of CEAs or anything like that? Should we need to transfer monies immediately over to the sewage and water board? Like, for example, I think that probably the best solution that I've heard out there about, preventing as many issues as possible with the saltwater wedge is to have that line being a hose further up the river that's bringing in fresh water and it having it be funneled to our water intake. And so let's say for some reason the sewage and water board needs to make some quick property improvements and they need money quick, that we can send them, whatever it could cost immediately over to them so that they could make these improvements. And of course, down the road, they can get reimbursed and then we would get reimbursed. I just want to make sure that we don't get stuck like not being able to move very quickly with whatever we may need to do.
Experientially, the sewage and water board has never had trouble or challenges accepting our money.
Right.
And that is probably going to be the same outcome in any one of these situations. I think that there is a lot on the books already, so I don't think that we'll have that particular challenge.
Perfect, good. And that's actually a great answer for this particular case, just making sure that there's not going to be any type of hiccups or anything should we need to move really quickly to get something done. And it would be coming from fund balance, Mr. Montano, you think? Likely.
I hope not. I hope that it's funded from something else. And I know that part of that discussion on what you just described, some of the challenges I think that our attorneys are dealing with is the need for eminent domain for many of this line. So I think that there is almost more of a land use challenge than a financial problem that they're trying to address currently. I want to say that I hope and anticipate that the federal funding would be able to build this out and address it. But once again, if it comes, to the point where it happens or doesn't happen based on funding, yes, I would point to fund balance as the number one priority, or capital funds or some sort of funding.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think it needs to be Fed funding with, overall really kind of state coordination, since this would be kind of a regional approach. But I think what's really important about this particular project and the way we need to look at it is that the issue of saltwater intrusion is not going to be something that goes away. And so this is likely something that we could be dealing with year in and year out. And this actually could be the solution that would be the recurring solution that we would need. We could tap into this, should God forbid this happens again next year, or potentially even, if we have a severe storm or whatever it could be. I think there are many options for building this particular line, but I agree with you. I think that there's some property issues that we'll have to work through, but I just wanted to make sure that the funding, should somehow we would need to step in a little bit and get reimbursed, as we've been talking about, that would not be something that would be delayed. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Montano, I have a couple of specifics about things that are in the slides, but I wasn't sure if there's anything else you want to cover.
No, I'm happy to just open it up to questions on ARPA, and then we can also piggyback or bounce back and forth on the fund balance report that is toward the end as well.
All right, so the first question I have, when FQED presented here earlier, they said that they have money allocated to them, that they haven't been able to get lights lit. We still have money significantly unspent on grounds patrol expansion. And I guess I just say this, when I'm a district council member in A and I'm hearing about the French Quarter in C, I just worry that things are starting to build up. So I just want to make sure that whatever money that they have, it's slide 22, Courtney, that whatever money that they have is being spent appropriately, because we just kind of keep hearing about it. And I realize it's not necessarily a Gilbert or a Norm issue, but just kind of want to make sure that the money both for these grounds patrol itself, but as well as the quality of life issues and bollards and lights, et cetera, are being dispensed.
And if there's a point, this is where everyone's on notice. If you don't spend your money, I mean, we're not going to just let it linger. It's going to be reallocated, reevaluated. I can't speak directly to where exactly they are in the process other than what the update says, but we will highlight it and I'll have some follow-up relative to that.
Okay.
And I would just add to that, this pot of money was not reappropriated to be in the personnel category until earlier this year. So that was part of the delay as well.
Okay,
It was originally mistakenly appropriated to other operating, so we needed to make that move. But Ross has completed hiring. I think he has 2 more positions to expand it further. So we'll start to see spend down on that. And then again, remember, this is the 3-year allocation. So this will take those folks through the end of 2026 on the payroll.
okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure also for the quality of life issues.
Absolutely.
yeah.
And this group will have a part to play in the operation of the Bollard system, which is in development right now, as well as the Royal Street pedestrian. Wall.
Okay. And then the only other major one I had questions about, slides 44 and 45. DPW still hasn't spent their money on right-of-way improvements. And I know a lot of us get eaten up by striping. I know you all get eaten up also about rewiring issues, and this is why the traffic signal or the light isn't working. Catch basin cleaning, we're way behind. So I just curious where things stand in the process.
It's a expressed frustration as well to see this. I'll have to follow up. I think this
Okay.
is one of the things that has to, I don't have a good answer for that.
That's fine. I mean, and again, I realize we're all trying to play catch up, but a lot of my questions are meant to mitigate further questions. And so that's all that I'm trying to do, with those 2. Okay. Does anybody else have any other, I know I have one comment card, but anything else? Seeing no other questions from the council, where did Monique go? Okay, all right, well, I know she had one question. Do you have any online comments or questions? Why don't we give her like 30 seconds, and then if we can't do anything, we can move on to the voting items quickly. Thank you all for being here too. There she is. Yeah, no worries. We're just took a little break.
Somehow I knew that was gonna happen. Monique Blossom, Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center. I had a similar question about right to counsel and using emergency rental assistance funds for that. Our clients that use the right to counsel program are often leaving eviction court than going to apply for emergency rental assistance. So it's really important that we have those funds separated. And then on top of that, I would just advocate that we find it's such an important program. It saves us so much money in the long run when we're preventing evictions, that we find a place permanently in the budget. So we're not using fund balance to cover that 2 million plus inflation that we need to run the program. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I know Mr. Montano said he'd look into that, so we appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you all for the presentation.
Thank you.
I'm gonna move to the voting items now. And we'll try and run through those and see if anybody has any questions. All right, item number 5, ordinance calendar numbers 34, 371 and 372. This is to appropriate funds to Orleans Parish Juvenile Court for 3 additional contract positions to help meet their mission and goals. And it's a transfer of $125,000. Any questions? All right, I'll move for approval. Seconded by Councilmember Morel. Please vote your machines. 3 yeas, no nays. And I'd ask that all the items that are voted on unanimously be moved to the consent agenda, please. All right, item number 6, 34, 373 and 374. This is to appropriate funds to Clerk of Criminal Court for 2020-22 for audit fees, transfer of $70,000. Councilmember Moreno moves. Councilmember Morale seconds. 3 yeas, no nays. Item number 7, calendar numbers 34, 375 and 376. This is to appropriate grant funds, Department of Mosquito, Termite and Rodent Control to coordinate training for pest management. Moved by ED Chair Moreno. Seconded by Councilmember Morale. 3 yeas, no nays. All right, item number 8, 34, 387, 388. Appropriate grant funds, Department of Workforce Investment for Pathway Home Program to enroll 150 justice-involved adults living in OJC. Moved by Councilmember Moreno, I seconded. 3 yeas, no nays. Item number 9, ordinance calendar number 34-389-390. Appropriate grant funds to municipal and traffic court to pay salaries and fringe benefits for 2 positions. I'll move for approval. Seconded by Councilmember Moreno. 3 yeas, no nays. Item number 10, calendar numbers 34-407 and 408, appropriating grant funds awarded by FEMA to Office of Mayor for emergency costs as a result of Hurricane Katrina. So we're still getting paid for that. Moved by Councilmember Moreno, seconded by Councilmember Morel. 3, need one more. 4 yeas. Welcome to Councilmember Green. Item number 11, ordinance calendar numbers 34-409, 410. This is to move funds within the Department of Health. Moved by Councilmember Moreno, seconded by Councilmember Morel. 4 yeas, no nays. This one is item number 12, 34-412 and 413, $250,000 to city planning to help with additional funding for short-term rental study. So I'll move for approval of that, seconded by Councilmember Moreno. 4 yeas, no nays. Item number 13, 34-414, 34-415, transfer from NORD interdepartmentally for Keller Center. Moved by Councilmember Moreno, I seconded. 4 yeas, no nays. Number 14 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a CEA with National Parent Leadership Institute. I'll move for approval. Seconded by Councilmember Morel. 4 yeas, no nays. Is there anybody here from civil service on item number 15? Well, Liz, what we'll just do is we'll keep these on the agenda for October 5th. And if Mr. Hagman wants to explain it to us, then we can move forward at that time. All right. Thank you all very much. Motion to adjourn by Councilmember Moreno. I seconded. 4 yeas, no nays, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.